Hello, grade 8s. Today I've got a speech to share with you. It's from a book that I have called Canada Transformed, Speeches of Sir John A Macdonald. And what it is it's actually a collection of all the speeches ever written and read by Sir John A. Remember, he is one of Canada's longest serving prime ministers, so he was in power for quite a long time. He was a politician for a great portion of his life. This chapter is about nation maker. Sometimes he's known as a nation maker because of his important role in Confederation. So it's an interesting book because it's a secondary source. It's written by and edited by some historians who also put some notes in here for readers to kind of fully understand the context of the speeches. But the speeches themselves are primary sources, and as primary sources, they're very valuable historical documents because they give us an idea of what he was thinking at the time, what he was saying at the time, what he was saying in Parliament, to voters, in the newspapers, and to other politicians. And there's one particular speech that he gives at the Charlottetown Conference, or in and around the Charlottetown Conference timing, and I wanted to read a snippet of it for you. It's about a 7 to 10 minute speech. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just the intro paragraph and the last paragraph. And I'll give you a link in the comments as well on the full text if you're interested in reading it, and a video of an actor portraying the speech. As historians, we need to put on our critical thinking hat and think about, this is a primary source document, and it does give us a very good glimpse into John A. Macdonald's thinking at the time. But remember, this is something he was saying out loud to people in public, so it's not. It does have a slightly hidden bias or agenda in it that we have to think about as historians. Okay, let's get started with the speech. Okay, let's jump right into the speech. I just looked it up here, and I'm finding it on. I googled speech written by most famous and important Canadian ever, and this came up. And it begins like this. Picture perfect, you don't need no filter. Gorgeous, make 'em drop dead, you are a killer. Shower you with all my attention. Yeah, these are my only intentions. Wait a second. Oh, whoops. Wrong. Wrong speech. Oh, geez, that's awkward. Okay, I think I got the technical glitches worked out. Let's get into the real speech. And here we go. And before I read this speech, I will read the introduction to the speech from my book. The delegates from Canada, New Brunswick, PEI, and Nova Scotia met at Charlottetown in the first week of September 1864. When the discussions were over, they stopped at the Halifax Hotel in Halifax. The idea of Confederation had been discussed in principle at the recent conference, but the real work would begin on the opening of the legislature at Quebec City in October. Until then, the delegates continued to explain and promote their vision of a British North American Federation. A public dinner on a rain-drenched evening in Halifax provided a beautiful stage for Mcdonald. Inside the hotel, the delegates from the Charlottetown Conference, Tupper, Tilley, Cartier, Brown, Galt, all spoke. After a call to toast on Colonial Union had rung out, Mcdonald rose to the podium. Edward Whelan, who was a delegate from PEI, wrote down the speeches given that fall from newspaper reports and edited them in consultation with their authors. And Macdonald's speech on this occasion is included in this book. Okay, so the beginning of John A. Macdonald goes up to the podium and he's met with cheers, and he says he wants to talk about the Union. And then he says, the question of colonial union is one of such magnitude that it dwarfs every other question on this portion of the continent. It absorbs every thought as far as I am concerned. For 20 long years I have been dragging myself through the dreary waste of colonial politics. I thought there was no end, nothing worthy of ambition. But now I see something which is well worthy of all I have suffered in the cause of my little country. This question has now assumed a position that demands and commands the attention of all the colonies of British North America. Sorry, I forgot to mention, I'm going to be reading from here. There may be obstructions, local difficulties may arise, disputes may occur, local jealousies may intervene, but it matters not. The wheel is now revolving, and we are only the fly on the wheel. We cannot delay it. The union of the colonies of British North America under one sovereign is a fixed fact. Sir, this meeting in Halifax will be ever remembered in the history of British America, for here the delegates from the several provinces had the first opportunity of expressing their sentiments. We have been unable to announce them before, but now let me say that we have arrived unanimously at the opinion that the union of the provinces is for the advantage of all, and that the only question that remains to be settled is whether that union can be arranged with a due regard to sectional and local interests. I have no doubt that such an arrangement can be effected, that every difficulty will be found susceptible of solution, and that the great project will be successfully and happily realized. Okay, I'm going to stop there. His speech goes on to talk about a few things. Here he talks a little bit about that fear we talked about, where they're worried that if they don't become their own country, the Great Britain is no longer going to defend them using their own military. So it's time to step up. Here they talk a little bit about the United States. He says something funny here in 1864. It has been said that the United States government is a failure. Well, I guess with Donald Trump, he probably wasn't that far off, was he? No, but here he talks about how he thinks they can learn from the mistakes of the United States because they too became their own country, so they could kind of learn from them. Here he talks about how the provinces shouldn't be afraid of losing their own sovereignty or their own power or their own identity, that the provinces can still be kind of their own, I guess, entity, but still exist in the union, in the country. Here he goes on to talk about the railway and the economy. And here he talks about England and how England is the one that started the War of 1812 in a way, and how England is starting all these other conflicts, and yet Canada is the one that has to defend itself against English fights that they're picking. And here's the end of the speech, which I will read. Everything, gentlemen, is to be gained by union, and everything is to be lost by disunion. Everybody admits that union must take place sometime. I say now is the time. Here we are, now, in a state of peace and prosperity. Now we can sit down without any danger threatening us and consider and frame a scheme advantageous to each of these colonies. If we allow so favorable an opportunity to pass, it may never come again. But I believe we have arrived at such a conclusion in our deliberations that I may state without any breach of confidence that we are all unitedly agree that such a measure is a matter of the first necessity, or like the first importance, and that only a few obstacles may stand in its way. Okay, there we go. I hope you enjoyed the speech. You'll notice right here, there is a little bit of bias and there's a little bit of salesmanship happening, because he says, that we're in a state of peace and prosperity. In other words, now's the time because we're not at war. But he's sort of conveniently leaving out the threat of the Fenian invasions, because those were a real and a scary threat. But, politicians, they always like to, bend the truth a little bit. And that's a good example right there of how historians need to read sources carefully and check for those biases. As I mentioned before, I'm going to link to you this website, so if you want to read the speech in full, you can, but that's totally optional. And the other video is the video of an actor reading the speech as well. Optional as well. The last thing you'll need to do this week is do a quick exit ticket quiz for me as well, to show me that you've been able to keep up with all the history this week and last week. Thanks very much, guys.